coming up on Arirang News. Heavy rain soaked the country today and will continue to do so until tomorrow. The torrential rainfall has caused authorities to put in all-out efforts to prevent damage. A car plowed into a sidewalk of a busy intersection in central Seoul on Monday night, killing 9 people and injuring 4. The driver claims the car suddenly accelerated while police are investigating the exact circumstances. The nation's inflation continued to slow 11-month low of 2.4% in June. Yet prices of fresh produce and petroleum products remain a concern. Good evening. Welcome to the 9 p.m. edition of Arirang News. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. We start with torrential rain that has been pounding the country. The rain is expected to continue until tomorrow. Our Choi Soo-young starts us off.
As the monsoon season begins in South Korea, officially on Jeju Island 2 weeks ago, there have been occasional outbursts of rain, but not much. But as of Tuesday morning, heavy rain started pounding the southern region and is slowly moving northward, sweeping across the entire nation. Currently, it has almost stopped raining in the south of the country, but heavy rain is expected in the capital area. According to the weather authorities, there will be heavy rainfall of 30 to 50 millimeters per hour overall, but a total of between 80 millimeters and 120 millimeters will hit the capital and central regions until Wednesday. Usually, rainfall exceeding 15 millimeters per hour is considered heavy, while at 30 millimeters per hour, it's hard for people to even see what's in front of them. With heavy rain sweeping nationwide, the Ministry of Interior and Safety raised its heavy rain warning level from interest to caution on Tuesday morning. The ministry also ordered a Level 1 activation of the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures headquarters. With the start of the monsoon season in South Korea, the ministry plans to specifically monitor areas at risk of flooding, such as underpasses, riverbanks, and underground parking lots, which it could order closed while providing alternative routes. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo also instructed thorough safety measures and a close monitoring of the situation. The authorities will help residents living in areas at risk of landslides and flooding to ensure they can evacuate immediately if dangerous situations occur. In order to prevent casualties and damage, the government is advising people to stay away from streams and rivers that are prone to flooding. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
Also on the local front, a shocking car crash in the capital last night killed 9 people. Police are looking into what the driver claims as sudden unintended acceleration. An Sung-jin has the latest.
A devastating scene in downtown Seoul on Monday night. A car drove into a group of pedestrians waiting at a crosswalk, killing 9 people and injuring 4 others near Seoul City Hall at around 9:27 p.m. The driver, a 68-year-old man with more than 40 years of experience as a city bus driver, is blaming sudden unintended acceleration. A witness at the scene is saying otherwise.
마지막에 밟은 거예요. 저기 앞에서. 다 치고 나서, 거의 치고 나서요. 그 앞에서. 급발진 차량은 사고나 차릴 때 알잖아요. 전봇대라도 박아야 되잖아요. 그거 없어서 그냥 거기서 딱 멈췄어요.
An expert said that the driver did not try to avoid the pedestrians as you would in case of a sudden acceleration, adding that the deadly accident could have simply been caused by a mistake or carelessness. The vehicle was also seen driving in the wrong direction and collided with 2 vehicles before hitting people. Investigators are not fully ruling out the possibility of issues within the car considering the speed involved, reportedly 100 kilometers per hour.
We specifically checked whether or not he was drinking, and it is understood that he was not under the influence of alcohol.
The police took the driver in on charges of accidental homicide, which falls under violations of the Special Act on the Settlement of Traffic Accidents. In a later briefing, the police stated that the driver was negative in all quick drug tests and had been taken to hospital due to injuries he himself suffered in the accident. Analysis will be carried out by the National Forensic Service on the driver's vehicle, footage from nearby CCTV cameras, and the car's dash cam, as well as statements from witnesses. However, analysis from the National Forensic Service using its event data recorder system can take up to 2 months. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
In other news, North Korea says it tested a tactical ballistic missile carrying a super-large warhead on Monday. South Korea's military, however, yet again dismisses the claim, suggesting one of the two missiles launched yesterday fell near Pyongyang. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung reports.
North Korea on Tuesday morning claimed that it successfully tested a new type of tactical ballistic missile carrying a 4.5-ton super-large warhead the day before. This is the first time that the North has said it tested such a missile. The North state-run media said that the test of the new missile, named Hwasongpo 11 Ta 4.5, was conducted with a mock warhead aimed at verifying flight stability and accuracy to see if it can fly a maximum range of 500 kilometers and minimum range of 90 kilometers. South Korea's military, however, dismissed the North's claim, calling it a deception. According to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the regime launched two ballistic missiles, one which flew some 600 kilometers into the sea, and the other which traveled only 120 kilometers. The military once again suggested that the second launch was abnormal and appeared to have fallen in a field in an uninhabited area near the North's capital.
It is extremely rare to conduct a test launch inland, and there is a high possibility that its claim of success is a lie.
Last week, North Korea claimed a successful test of a new multi-warhead missile, contrasting with South Korea's assessment of a failure after a mid-air explosion. The regime's continued claims that appear to be false reveal that the North is trying to cover up its series of military failures, beginning with the recently failed launch of its spy satellite. An expert says the contradicting claims by the two Koreas have always been present.
When we take a look at past cases with regard to the success of these missile launches, North Korea treats even the smallest success as a great one, while our military assesses North Korea's small failures as major failures. This is being repeated to this day.
Meanwhile, more missile launches are expected as Pyongyang said it will carry out another test launch of the same type of missile this month to test the accuracy and the explosion power of the super-large warhead. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The South Korean Army has resumed live-fire artillery drills near the border with North Korea for the first time in 6 years. The South Korean military announced Tuesday that the Army carried out firing drills using K-9 self-propelled artillery units, among others, in Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do provinces. This is the first time such an exercise has taken place within 5 kilometers of the military demarcation line since the Inter-Korean Military Agreement was signed in 2018. Early last month, Seoul suspended all clauses of the agreement following North Korea's continued provocations, including sending balloons carrying waste over the border. Former U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice commended President Yoon Suk-yeol's efforts to strengthen Seoul's alliance with Washington as well as its relations with Tokyo. This came on Tuesday as the South Korean leader met Rice and discussed global security issues, including North Korea's nuclear threat and the regime's military cooperation with Russia. Yoon highlighted her past role as State Secretary and National Security Advisor in bolstering the South Korea-U.S. alliance under the Bush administration. He asked for her continued efforts toward denuclearizing North Korea and improving human rights under the ruling regime. Rice pledged to continue backing the alliance, saying she had felt their bilateral ties growing stronger than ever since Yoon took office, while noting his efforts to improve relations with Japan. South Korea and Vietnam have agreed to strengthen efforts for peace and denuclearization amid North Korea's nuclear weapons development and missile provocations. On Tuesday, President Yoon Suk-yeol met with Vietnamese Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh, who is on an official visit to South Korea. Yoon expressed hope that their countries would further bolster trade and investment, especially with Korean firms participating in Vietnam's energy projects. Chin said he greatly appreciates the contribution of Korean companies to Vietnam's economic growth, pledging more supportive regulations to facilitate investment. As Yoon stressed the importance of global solidarity and sanctions against North Korea's weapons development, the two leaders agreed to strengthen strategic communication and cooperation for the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. President Yoon Suk-yeol will be dealing with an opposition-led National Assembly for the remainder of his term. With that in mind, today he called for cooperation with the government, urging to end conflicts and confrontation. Our presidential office correspondent Kim Do-yeon covers his remarks.
With just days to go until the opening ceremony for the 22nd National Assembly, President Yoon on Tuesday emphasized the need for the executive and legislative branches of the government to work together, saying that there was no future if the nation's politics repeated previous conflicts and confrontation.
국정의 목표, 정치의 목표는 하나입니다. 민생의 어려움을 해결하고 국민을 더 행복하게 만드는 것입니다. 이러한 목표만큼은 정부와 국회가 다르지 않다고 저는 믿습니다.
This part of his address to a cabinet meeting comes as Yoon faces an opposition-led assembly until the end of his term. Just the day before, Yoon's close aides, including his chief of staff, were called to appear before the House Steering Committee, whose opposition party members grilled them well into the night about several issues related to the presidential office. Now, a 3-day interpellation session has also kicked off. Yoon's spokesperson said that during the cabinet meeting, the president ordered his aides to take the time to explain in detail to lawmakers and citizens about the government's focuses: proactive global diplomacy, a free market economy led by the private sector, and welfare for the socially vulnerable.
The president said that our government's proactive global diplomacy is not focused on domestic political calculations, but rather on expanding the horizons of diplomacy to enable our businesses and citizens to participate more extensively on the international stage.
He also emphasized that for the economy to thrive, businesses must grow, underscoring that proactive global diplomacy is directly tied to the well-being of the people. Yoon also mentioned that the country's low birth rate and aging population have reached a state of a national emergency that requires urgent attention. Amid fierce clashes between the ruling and opposition parties, Yoon also raised the need to narrow differences through rational dialogue and consensus, saying the government and parliament both share the goal of improving the people's livelihoods. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The National Assembly today began its interpellation of the Yoon administration's policies. The session focused on political issues, diplomacy, and security. Meanwhile, the ruling party threatened to launch a filibuster after the Q&A session if the opposition seeks to pass a contentious bill mandating a special probe into a Marine's death. Our very own Shin Ha-young has the details.
Marking the 22nd National Assembly's first government question and answer session on Tuesday, political matters as well as diplomacy and security took center stage. Among the topics addressed was the government's response to North Korea's latest provocations, including Pyongyang sending of voice-carrying balloons. In response, Defense Minister Shin Won-sik said that the country's military is preparing for different provocations by the regime.
Our military is training hard and preparing specific plans to handle various forms of North Korean provocations. Please trust in our forces.
Regarding a question on the Yoon administration's North Korea policy, Prime Minister Han Duck-soo stated that the government is open to dialogue with the North. After the Q&A session, the opposition-led assembly is planning to vote on a special prosecution investigation into the death of a Marine. In response, the PPP is planning to try to block the bill with a filibuster. A bill with the same purpose was passed in the previous 21st National Assembly but was vetoed by President Yoon Suk-yeol. The PPP has been arguing that an independent probe is unnecessary as the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials is currently looking into the case. Meanwhile, on Wednesday, questions will focus on the economy while issues related to education, society, and culture will be addressed on the final day of the government Q&A session. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Korea's consumer price index accelerated 2.4% in June, the slowest pace in almost a year. But high costs of fresh produce and petroleum products remain a concern. Our business correspondent Moon Hye-ryun reports.
Inflation in South Korea is showing signs of stabilizing in the 2% range despite continued high prices for fruit. Data from Statistics Korea on Tuesday shows that the country's consumer price index, a key gauge of inflation, rose by 2.4% in June compared to the same month the year before. This is the lowest figure seen in 11 months, inching closer to the target inflation at 2%. The rise in consumer prices hovered above 3% at the start of the year before dropping below the 3% mark in April and remaining in the 2% range for 3 consecutive months. Core inflation excluding volatile food and energy prices came to 2.2%, while the index measuring 144 daily necessities rose by 2.8%. Prices for fresh produce drove these figures, with the cost of fresh fruit rising by more than 31% on year. Apple prices jumped over 63%, while the cost of pears more than doubled. Petroleum prices also showed the largest hike in a year and a half, surging by 4.3%, with a spokesperson from Statistics Korea claiming that this was due to the base effect of petroleum prices being low this time last year. Speaking at a meeting to discuss these latest figures, the first Vice Minister of Economy and Finance said that this falls in line with earlier predictions from the government for prices stabilizing in the mid-2% range in the second half of the year. Meanwhile, the Agriculture Ministry pledged to stabilize the supply and demand of vegetables vulnerable to summer rain and heat, as well as preemptively managing potential risks such as diseases affecting fruit trees. Starting yesterday, the government applied a new tariff quota to 7 different types of food ingredients such as coffee concentrate, as well as extending the lower tariffs on 28 types of fruit until the end of September. It will also strengthen inspections on the oil market after the partial return of taxes that scaled back the fuel tax cut on gasoline from 25% to 20%. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
South Korea's minimum wage will not be differentiated by sector. The decision was made on Tuesday by the Minimum Wage Commission, consisting of representatives from businesses, labor, and the general public, with 11 voting for wages to be differentiated by sector and 15 voting against it. The business sector argued that it has been difficult for small business owners to pay the elevated minimum wages, while the labor sector said that differentiating may cause discrimination. While the current minimum wage law stipulates that wages can be differentiated by sector, it was implemented only once when it was first introduced in 1988. In sports news, Korea's Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism on Tuesday announced detailed support plans for Team Korea at the Paris 2024 Olympics. From July 12th to August 11th, a base camp will be set up at the National Center of La Défense Fontainebleau, providing accommodation, training facilities, and medical services. Badminton, boxing, and judo athletes will have their training partners there to help them prepare. And to promote Korean culture during the Olympics, the ministry will open the Korea House at the Maison de la Chimie Conference Center in the French capital. This venue will host a hanbok fashion show, exhibitions, K-pop classes, and music performances. The games will run from July 26th to August 11th. The eldest member of K-pop boy band sensation BTS Jin will reportedly be a torchbearer at the 2024 Paris Summer Olympics. He will depart for France shortly to participate in the torch relay for the Olympics, while the exact location and schedule have not been disclosed yet. After carrying the torch in the Olympics as the first BTS member to complete his mandatory military service, Jin is set to make his official comeback to the entertainment industry with variety show appearances and the release of a new album later this year. In our latest interview segment, one of the world's most accomplished economists has called on Korea to avoid policies that seek to prevent inevitable market developments and to focus instead on economic flexibility and the fostering of its immigrant workforce. Our Park Gun-woo has more.
South Korea has seen on-year increases in exports for 9 consecutive months, leading to rosy economic prospects for trade. Despite a positive outlook, pundits point out difficulties that could distract the country from seeing further positive results. I sat down with Professor Ann Kruger, the former First Deputy Managing Director of the IMF, to get her take.
Korea is in a difficult situation because of the trade war between the U.S. and China, no doubt about that. I think Korea is in difficulty because obviously there's some things where the Americans are concerned about the military secrets, some of which could be important, and they don't want any of that to go to the Chinese too easily too soon. And if there are some of those components, then there will be some troubles without doubt, because right now the U.S. is pushing that very strongly.
She provided more detail on how South Korea should react to such uncertainties.
There are a lot of uncertainties with regard to world trade that Korea, like anybody else, is subject to, only because Korea is more dependent on trade. It may be more important here to do it. The only problem is that all you can do about it is make sure that the domestic economy is healthy, to make sure that it's flexible, and to make sure that the markets can adjust as they need to, and not try to regulate and prevent things from happening, because fighting markets is not a formula for success ever.
She also spoke about the need for policies to allow more immigrants to come to Korea to improve economic growth.
Korea has not allowed very many immigrants. The countries that have are doing better. One of the reasons the U.S. economy is doing so well is we still have the immigrants in, and it may very well be that Korea wishes to change at least somewhat immigration policy and bring in more foreigners with either the skills or just the jobs that need to be filling.
The professor was in Seoul last week for the Seoul International Finance Conference, where she took part as a keynote speaker and addressed South Korea's significance in the region. How important is Korea in the global economy as Asia's financial hub?
Seoul is already a financial center for Korea. Korea's economy is healthy. I think there would have to be some opening up even more of the capital account and a few other things, but on the whole, if those things are done, I think the likelihood that things can work out very favorably is very good.
박건우, Arirang News.
Unlike yesterday, rain is pouring all over the country today. This rain is expected to remain strong and heavy. As for the amount of rain, up to 120 millimeters is expected in Gangwon-do and northern Gyeonggi-do provinces, and more than 100 in the Seoul metropolitan area. Up to 80 millimeters is also expected in the southern parts of the country. This rain will mostly stop tomorrow afternoon. In addition, gusty winds are expected in most parts of the country by tomorrow. Currently, a strong wind warning is issued for Jeju Island and strong wind advisories on the west coast and the coastlines of Jeollanam-do province. Please pay special attention to avoid safety accidents. Tomorrow, Daejeon, Gwangju, and Busan will start off at 24 degrees Celsius. It will move up to 27 in Seoul and Busan, Daegu and Gyeongju, 32 degrees. Meanwhile, the summer heat will slow down as it rains. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Nine people lost their lives after a car plowed into pedestrians on Monday night in central Seoul, a busy intersection near City Hall with so many offices. Those killed were just workers like us who were going home after either working late or celebrating a colleague's promotion. While the driver claims the car suddenly accelerated, witnesses and experts are divided over the authenticity of his words. Police are looking into details, expecting the National Forensic Service's investigation to be the key to providing a clearer picture. No matter what the reason is, one unchangeable truth is that there's no sufficient way to soothe the bereaved and compensate for their sorrow. What we could do is to seek even the smallest details that led to the tragedy and prevent anything like that from happening ever again.
That is all for today. Thank you for watching.